Does hydroxychloroquine work? First off, I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be a doctor. All I do is read what doctors tell me. And that is what everyone else should be doing as well when it comes to any kind of medical advice. Either read about what a doctor tells you or actually go and ask a doctor. Because it's generally a pretty good idea to get your information from people who are experts, who actually study these things, rather than from a bunch of people, such as the President of the United States and his advisors, who are just making stuff up off the top of their head and hoping that it's true. It's amazing that we've even gotten to this point where someone has to emphasize to you that they're not a doctor. Because we have so many people right now who are giving advice about hydroxychloroquine and discussing hydroxychloroquine as though they've really been studying this for years and come up with these elaborate conspiracy theories as to why they, whoever they may be, are actually keeping hydroxychloroquine out of your hands. The amateurism that is taking place with respect to the discussion about hydroxychloroquine really is pretty disconcerting and dangerous. And the person who is most dangerous, of course, is Trump himself. And I thought there would be limits to what his supporters would actually trust from him, but it turns out right now that among his most rabid supporters, there really are no limits whatsoever. Whatever he tells them, regardless of whether it's about climate change or unemployment or the economy or education, or even when it comes to their own health, the most rabid Trump supporters simply eat it up. Now, luckily, most people who voted for Donald Trump are not even his most rabid supporters. I think they can still be reasoned with. But some people are just too far gone. And when people are willing to jeopardize their own health and the health of their countrymen because of something that their president has told them that has no basis whatsoever in reality, that's a problem. It's a really big problem. But in some respects, I was thinking about how we got to this point, and really, it's not surprising because we have had this anti-scientific attitude take root in America in the past several decades. Now, a rejection of science has been a constant throughout modern human history and throughout the development of science, but right now we have avenues for disseminating information and inaccurate information that are much more efficient than anything that we had seen before. As a result of that, not only is there a lot more junk information out there that has no basis in science, but it's being spread to people and it's doing great harm. And let's take a look at some of the examples of this because they're really easy to find. Gwyneth Paltrow selling goop. Gwyneth Paltrow has made more money selling goop, which is a great name for it because it's trash. She made more money selling goop to unsuspecting people than she did as an actress. And all of this garbage that she's selling and making claims about has no basis whatsoever in any kind of reality, but people are still eating it up, and it's a multi-million-dollar business. In fact, the entire quote-unquote wellness business is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's just allowed to exist in the United States, and it's allowed to exist because of a great deal of corruption. You look, for example, at the vitamin industry. Many vitamins come from the state of Utah, or many businesses come from the state of Utah. Well, Senator Orrin Hatch from the state of Utah has been defending these companies for years while they're making all kinds of nonsensical claims, just with the disclaimer that says, none of these things have actually been tested by the FDA or proven by the FDA. Well, then why in the hell are they allowed to make these claims? There are times when we say, well, and this comes from the right, well, we're going to get rid of regulations. Are these the kind of regulations that you want to get rid of? Do you really want to have so few regulations that you're allowing all of these vitamin companies to make billions of dollars taking your hard-earned money while making reckless claims about what their vitamins can actually do? When speaking of vitamins too, it's not just movie stars who are getting in. Tom Brady, in his company, TB3 or TB4 or whatever the hell he calls it, evidently the money that he made selling Uggs and being a quarterback, not enough for him. So he has to go out there and he has to sell you a bunch of bullshit vitamins, okay, at a high cost, at a high price, and say, you know what? This is what you need, folks. He's got some vitamins out there that he's selling for $45. And do you think it's an accident that he's selling these vitamins right now at several times their cost in the middle of a coronavirus epidemic? People will do it because they're desperate for something. That is completely understandable. Okay? They're scared. They're desperate. They don't know what to do. And a lot of them love Tom Brady. Okay? He's the greatest football player in the history of the league. That doesn't make him a good human being. It certainly doesn't make him a doctor. But at the same time, people are just eating this stuff up. And Dr. Oz, who's a real doctor and should know better, but he sold out a long time ago because he's selling all kinds of wellness garbage out there. And why is there a forum out there for him on television? Why is there a forum out there for him on Oprah to peddle all this crap that he's selling that has nothing to do with medicine and that he's hoping is actually going to or that people are hoping is going to do some kind of benefit for them? But really, the only person who benefits is Dr. Oz because he's lining his pockets at your expense. And this is coming from the right and it's coming from the left. And this has been a problem for a long time because this isn't just about hydroxychloroquine. This is about a general attitude that we have in this country, that expertise doesn't matter. That you really don't need to trust the people who study a topic every single day. Because you've got an opinion, and God damn it, you're entitled to opinion, and no one's going to move you from that opinion because you're an American and you have every right to it. Well, everyone has a right to an opinion, I guess, but do we have to so easily spread it with such ignorance? And do we have to have so much hostility to the scientists who might actually provide us with some kind of useful information so that we're not just sitting in this tub of ignorance, sharing a bunch of opinions that have no basis in reality? And this has been a problem from actually both sides for a long time. The right likes to say that the left doesn't believe in science, but the left has many of the same issues. The only thing that's different is the substance. With the right, they don't believe in climate change. An overwhelming amount of scientists, people who actually study this stuff, say, yes, climate change is real. I'm going to believe those scientists. But then Senator James Inhofe from Oklahoma decides to throw a snowball in the middle of the halls of Congress and says, well, that means we don't have any climate change. I mean, how stupid do you have to be to actually believe something like that? And why would you believe that guy instead of people who actually study this stuff? How long has the right actually been hostile to evolution as well? This debate should have been settled a long time ago. I thought we settled this in the 1930s. And at the same time, we have people who are saying, well, you know what? We have to teach creationism, which is not a science, can never be a science, should not be mistaken as a science, but we have to teach that as the alternative to evolution. No, evolution is science and creationism is something that you believe. You want to believe it, that's fine. That doesn't mean that you got to teach it to your kids. Teach it to my kids. Teach it to our kids. And of course, the left bashes the right for this, and rightfully so. But the left has its own hangups. How many times have you heard from the left that we need to ban GMOs, genetically modified organisms? Look, folks, I'm not a big fan of corporate farming, but I also understand that GMOs have led to feeding a lot of people and doing a lot to actually eliminate starvation and hunger in this world. If you got a better plan, I'm all ears. But I just don't see it right now. And we have had many studies on GMOs, and they don't show that there's any kind of an escalation in disease as a result of pumping our foods full of GMOs. So in the meantime, I'm actually going to believe that GMOs are safe. Now, if other data comes along, then I'll change the way that I do things. But at that point, I'm going to be relying on the words of a scientist. I'm not going to be relying on the words of a bunch of kooky leftists who just say, well, GMOs are bad because I say they're bad and because Monsanto is bad. Yeah, Monsanto really sucks. I don't like Monsanto any more than the next guy. But until you can prove to me that GMOs are actually somehow harmful to human beings, I'm going to continue to believe that they're a necessity for people to feed themselves in this world. Or what about organic food? Look, sure, I like organic food. Oftentimes organic food tastes better. But this is where both arrogance and ignorance have actually taken place, and also where corruption has as well. Organic food from your local farmer is great. But in Washington, they've so manipulated the term organic and allowed that label to be put on so much stuff that is questionable as to whether it's organic, that really the term has become meaningless. Now, whenever I see something in the grocery store that's claimed to be organic, the only difference I really notice is that it's more expensive. I just don't trust the label. Yeah, I trust what I'm going to grow in my own backyard. Okay, I'm more inclined to trust my local farmer. But oftentimes you got two fields, massive fields out in the middle of a place. And then you've got a conventional field right next to an organic field. Folks, the wind blows. Okay? And what happens is that the wind's going to blow all of those insecticides and pesticides from the conventional field into the organic field. It's becoming a meaningless term. And many of the places or many of the businesses that have manipulated this organic term have done so by actually going and paying off members of Congress, contributing to their campaigns, buying them so that they would lessen the restrictions for what you need to do in order to label something as organic. Nevertheless, from the left, I always believe, God only eat organic, eat organic, eat organic. So both sides have hang-ups. This is not a right or a left issue. It is an issue of both sides. Really, all that you've got to do when it comes to hydroxychloroquine, let's circle back to that, or any medication, is to ensure that the information that you're getting is actually coming from experts. Don't ask your neighbor about hydroxychloroquine. Don't ask some guy on Facebook on hydroxychloroquine. I mean, some of the conversations that I've seen on Facebook on hydroxychloroquine are infinitely stupid. I am amazed at some of the stuff that I'm seeing from otherwise intelligent human beings. I simply don't get it. I mean, the conspiracy theories and the medical explanations, and that they are trying to kill you and they don't want to give you hydroxychloroquine because they don't want to pay for it, and they are making money off something else. I mean, the they that they're always talking about, I have no idea who the hell this is. And frankly, I'm just tired of hearing it. You should be tired of hearing it. If you're going to get information on hydroxychloroquine or any other medication, talk to a doctor. Talk to a scientist. Read what these scientists and doctors actually have to say. Don't just listen to somebody off the street. And don't listen to Trump, because Trump is more reckless about this than anybody. The only reason that we're in this position in the first place of talking about hydroxychloroquine is because Trump has been pushing it. And he's been pushing it because he wants credit for actually saving a lot of people's lives instead of blame, which he should get, for the fact that a lot of Americans are dying. So today, when I discuss this question, does hydroxychloroquine work? I'm not going to quote any politicians. I'm not going to quote my neighbor, and I'm certainly not going to quote the dope on Facebook. I'm going to tell you what doctors do. So let's take a look at what doctors have been telling you. USA Today, May 19th, 2020. Quote, "The sense of most of my colleagues is that hydroxychloroquine is useless," said Otto Yang, an infectious disease specialist, and Ronald Reagan, UCLA Medical Center in Santa Monica, California. So Otto Yang is an infectious disease specialist himself, and of course, because he doesn't live in a cocoon and doctors are always communicating with themselves, with other doctors, he's talking to all of these colleagues who are telling him, you know what, hydroxychloroquine is a waste of time. It turns out that hydroxychloroquine, according to Yang, works against all kinds of viruses in a test tube, including the flu, HIV, chikungunya, and dengue, he said. But that effectiveness does not seem to translate to people, either to reduce illness or, in at least one flu trial, to prevent it. I would have never known that. I would think, well, okay, if it works in a test tube, I guess you just move on with it. It works in a human being. How the hell do I know? I'm not a doctor. But luckily, we have doctors who are actually providing us this information, are forthright with this information, and disseminating this information to us so that we know something about it. Listen to those people, especially if the information is so easy to find these days. Why the hell would you listen to somebody else, especially Donald Trump, when a doctor is telling you what's actually happening? Quote, in clinical trials against all of those diseases, it completely failed. I don't see any reason that it's going to be different for this virus, he said. We need to move on. You know why he's saying we need to move on? Because the world is a place of finite resources and finite attention as well. There's only so much money to do clinical studies. And there's only so many people who are willing to do them. And if all the money is coming in to test hydroxychloroquine, then that means you're not testing other things nearly as much. That means you're much less likely to actually find some kind of a cure or a vaccine. And it's a public health issue. On April 24th, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration warned against the use of hydroxychloroquine outside of a hospital setting or clinical trial. Quote, hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine have not been shown to be safe and effective for treating or preventing COVID-19. So now you have the FDA, which is telling you not only that this thing probably doesn't work, but also that it's just flat out dangerous. Who are you going to trust on this? The FDA, which is run by doctors, or Trump, who's not a doctor and who doesn't really know anything about anything? There was another doctor who was quoted here, Dr. Fincher, said, quote, I'm not sure why Trump has latched onto this, but I think it's concerning in that other people will say, if it's good enough for the president, it's good enough for me, Fincher said. We don't want people to die of cardiac dysrhythmia because they were trying to protect COVID. That would just be awful. Yeah, I'd say that'd be pretty awful, actually. Because there are a lot of people out there, Trump supporters especially, who are going to say, you know what? It's good enough for that guy, and I believe everything that guy says. Why would you do that? Do you really think that Trump is hanging out in the White House with test tubes and microscopes and testing this disease? Do you really think that he's talking to a bunch of other doctors, that he's talking to Deborah Birx, to Anthony Fauci, and they're telling him, you know what? Hydroxychloroquine is a great idea. Do you really think that he's up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning reading up about this? Do you think he's actually taking the guidance of FDA and CDC officials? He's not doing any of this. He's not doing any of this. There's no reason whatsoever to believe the guy. And not only could it be ineffective, but it may end up actually hurting you. Remember, there's a reason that all of these medications have to be received under prescription and should be taken under a doctor's care, because you have no idea what other medical conditions you may be struggling with, and you have no idea what these medications are going to do to you. One other concern, according to USA Today, is that higher demand for hydroxychloroquine could deny access to people who need it to treat their chronic autoimmune disease. Dr. Fincher said she has 3 patients who struggled this spring to get the drug. Hydroxychloroquine actually is a very effective drug for lupus. And lupus can be a debilitating autoimmune disease. And there are a lot of people out there struggling with lupus right now who are having difficulty getting their medication because everyone wants hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19. This is a problem. Not only are you risking harm to yourself, but you're also risking harm to your fellow Americans. And for what? For a drug that doesn't even work for the purpose that you want it for. We know it doesn't work for COVID-19. We know it does work for lupus. We need to get it to the people who are actually struggling with lupus and other disorders that hydroxychloroquine has been proven to be effective for. Think about how we are screwing so many fellow Americans. There are millions of people who are struggling with lupus, and we're just putting the screws to them because we want to chase some other medication because our idiot president actually said, well, golly gee whiz, what do you have to lose? You might as well take it. What do you have to lose? How about your life? How about your fellow American's life? That's what you have to lose. New York Times, May 19th, 2020. And I really like this quote from Dr. William O'Neill because what Dr. O'Neill says is that really this has nothing to do with politics. It shouldn't be a political issue at all. It's amazing that medication like this right now has become a political issue. I cannot think of any time in our history that a medication has been politicized like this, and it's because of the sick person who's in the White House. Quote, the virus is not Democrat or Republican, and hydroxychloroquine is not Democrat or Republican. And I'm just hopeful that people will allow us to finish our scientific work, said Dr. William O'Neill, an interventional cardiologist at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, who is studying hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic in healthcare workers. Yeah, let doctors finish their work. It's at this point that you're supposed to have the FDA and the CDC step in. And when Trump says, go ahead and take hydroxychloroquine, what do you have to lose? The FDA and the CDC should be stepping in and saying, you know what? Do not prescribe this drug unless someone actually has it with a disease that it is proven to work for, not for COVID-19. But the CDC is gutless under Trump. The FDA has actually shown some kind of balls over here. But really, they should put a stop to this right now. You shouldn't let a president politicize a medication that is necessary for millions of Americans. Dr. O'Neill added, the worst thing in the world that would happen is that at the end of this epidemic in late September, we don't have a cure or a preventative because we let politics interfere with the scientific process. That is absolutely right. Because right now, you just know that Trump is funneling more money to hydroxychloroquine research on this wild goose chase and ignoring some of these other medications. Well, what happens if that actually delays some kind of a cure? How many more thousands of Americans, tens of thousands of Americans are going to have to die because Trump gets it in his mind that hydroxychloroquine works, despite medical evidence to the contrary? Now, Trump, of course, he doesn't care because he doesn't listen. This man is just completely incapable of ever admitting that he's wrong. This is the only quote I'm going to have from him. It's as much as I can stomach. Quote, it's gotten a bad reputation only because I'm promoting it. If anybody else were promoting it, they would say it's the best thing ever. This is a bunch of goddamn nonsense. This is a bunch of goddamn nonsense. It's gotten a bad reputation because doctors are not seeing any kind of results that the drug is effective. It has nothing to do whether Trump is claiming this or someone else is claiming this. That's not how these scientists are working. These people are actually in labs trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. They're not concerned with what Donald Trump is saying. Donald Trump believes that the entire world is just obsessed with him, but some people are actually out there trying to do their jobs. And the job of these scientists is to save people's lives, to save American lives. But meanwhile, they have an American president who's interfering with that job and actually screwing them up. Dr. Adrian Hernandez, who directs the Clinical Research Institute at Duke University School of Medicine, says that no study, even those conducted in hospitalized patients, has produced definitive results about hydroxychloroquine for the coronavirus, though several have suggested it could be harmful, especially to patients with underlying heart conditions. There are a lot of people out there with underlying heart conditions. heart conditions. Heart disease is the leading killer of people in America. A lot of older people have heart disease. A lot of people who are overweight have heart disease. And at the same time, you're going to give them a drug right now that actually might make their conditions worse because the president is telling you that it might be a good idea. You've got to be a seriously sick, sociopathic individual, which Donald Trump is, to continue to tell people to take this drug, knowing full well that it may hurt them. And the only reason that you're saying that is because you think it might bolster your re-election chances, because you know he doesn't care about anything else. Nothing. The studies that have looked at hydroxychloroquine, they're not reassuring at all. Not at all. And the bigger the studies get, the more they confirm that this drug really doesn't work for coronavirus. An analysis of veterans treated with hydroxychloroquine found that 28% of them died, compared with 11% who had routine care. Those are not good numbers. Those are really not good numbers. A small study in Brazil was halted after patients taking a high dose of chloroquine, a predecessor to hydroxychloroquine that researchers consider less safe, developed irregular heart rates that increased their risk of a potentially fatal heart arrhythmia. Now, I don't know what the hell a heart arrhythmia is, but it certainly doesn't sound good. And if doctors are saying, well, look, this study is so dangerous that it may kill a bunch of people, let's stop it, that's bad, especially in a place like Brazil, which doesn't have medical guardrails that are anywhere near as restrictive as those in the United States. And for those doctors, they had enough. They said, we can't do this. We're killing people. Trump doesn't care. Bolsonaro, that lunatic who runs Brazil, he certainly doesn't care. More recently, a large observational study of 1,446 patients at New York Presbyterian Columbia University Hospital in New York City, published this month in the New England Journal of Medicine, found no clear benefit to hydroxychloroquine. This isn't 45 patients somewhere in France. This isn't a handful of patients somewhere in China. This is nearly 1,500 people in a hospital, and it's doing nothing. Well, you think, well, screw it, just give it to them anyway. Again, we've discussed this. It could actually kill you. And it's distracting us from researching things that might actually help us. All to satisfy one man's whims. This is insanity. Can you imagine laying in a hospital bed, getting ready for surgery with a bunch of doctors who are ready to perform on you, and Donald Trump comes in there and says, don't cut there instead. Are you going to sit there and actually follow his advice? Hell no, you wouldn't. Even the most rabid Trump supporter in the world said, you know what, why don't you take your red hat and get the hell out of here? But instead, when it comes to some kind of a pill to take, they're perfectly all right with it. I don't get this. I just don't understand this. This is just completely irrational behavior. It's moronic behavior. Washington Post, May 17th, 2020. One study by Eli S. Rosenberg and colleagues, published in the Journal of American Medical Association, examined 1,438 patients suffering from infection across 25 hospitals in the New York area between March 5th and March 28th. The study also looked at those who received hydroxychloroquine along with the antibiotic azithromycin. Mr. Trump had heralded the combination as a real chance to be one of the biggest game changers in the history of medicine. But here's the conclusion of the study. Quote, among patients hospitalized in metropolitan New York with COVID-19, treatment with hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, or both, compared with neither treatment, was not significantly associated with differences in hospital mortality. In other words, it doesn't matter if we gave them azithromycin by itself, or we gave them hydroxychloroquine by itself, or we gave them both, or we didn't give them anything. There was no difference in how many people were actually dying in those hospitals. It did nothing. Folks, this is easy to find. I'm not Donald Trump. I don't have the resources that the White House has. I have newspapers. I have magazines. I can access American Medical Association studies just like anyone else can. I can access New England Journal of Medicine studies like anyone else can. You know, even George W. Bush, for all of his deficiencies, he never did crap like this. Okay, he had to deal with SARS. Certainly nowhere near as severe as what we're dealing with right now, but at least he took it seriously. This guy doesn't take anything seriously. Even when it comes to life and death situations, it just doesn't matter. We could have a comet that is raining down from space upon us. And if he thinks that that comet landing in Kansas is going to affect his re-election chances, then he's going to say, it's nothing to worry about, it's just a pebble. It's going to burn up when it gets into the atmosphere. Homer Simpson said that it happens before, and I agree with Homer. Dr. Simpson. This is insanity. This is insanity that we're listening to a guy like this. We shouldn't listen to any politicians. I don't care what your political bent is. Listen to doctors about this. Quote, the second study by Joshua Gelleris and colleagues examined 1,376 patients at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia University Irving Medical Center in northern Manhattan from March 7th to April 8th. Their conclusion in the New England Journal of Medicine, quote, in this analysis involving a large sample of consecutive patients who had been hospitalized with COVID-19, the risk of intubation or death was not significantly higher or lower among patients who received hydroxychloroquine than among those who did not. The results, they said, do not support the use of hydroxychloroquine at present, except in clinical trials. So in other words, when you have these limited clinical trials by doctors, like this French guy, a disreputable doctor, who are trying to make the name for themselves, and they're not peer-reviewed, they can make a study say anything. But when you actually get into larger studies that are peer-reviewed and legitimate and follow a proper scientific process, and they're not twisted and they're done by proper doctors, what they're showing is that hydroxychloroquine is doing nothing to actually save people's lives. I can go over and over and over about this, but don't listen to me. All I'm doing is reading what doctors are actually telling me. Certainly don't listen to politicians. The amazing thing about this is people always say, politicians lie. They lie, they lie. Yeah, they do. All the time. You shouldn't trust them. But you're going to trust them with your health? You're going to trust Mitch McConnell because he's telling you that hydroxychloroquine might actually work? Or Lindsey Graham? Or Donald Trump, who is... this guy, he can utter 58 lies before he even has his breakfast. It's simple. Just listen to people who actually studied this stuff. It's really just as simple. And you can look it up. I didn't spend a great deal of time researching this. I put this together in 15 minutes, 20 minutes? It's really not that hard. I understand that doctors can be wrong. They're wrong all the time. I understand that scientists can be wrong. They're wrong all the time. They will freely admit this, but at least there is a process. At least they're always questioning themselves, questioning their own results, revisiting some of their own beliefs. And if the data shows them that they're wrong about something, at least they're going to reevaluate. Donald Trump is never going to do that. He's going to go for the next 5, 10, 15 years saying hydroxychloroquine is some kind of a solution. And he's got all these kiss-ass sycophants over there who are telling them the same thing. Dr. Peter Navarro, who is an economist and an academic and should know better, says, we've really got to research hydroxychloroquine because by not researching this, we may be killing a lot of people. Good Lord, why don't you shut up? What's really killing a lot of people is the fact that we're actually listening to a president who doesn't understand anything about anything, and especially nothing about science. But remember, he's a guy who understands more than anything. Nobody knows more about technology than Donald Trump. Nobody knows more about the military than Donald Trump. He knows more than the generals. Nobody knows more about science than Donald Trump. Nobody knows more about medicine than Donald Trump. At some point, regardless of your political bent, you got to stop believing this nonsense and do what you can just to protect the lives of your fellow Americans, of your family, and of yourself. That's it for today's episode. Please follow me on Instagram and Twitter at PragmatismUSA76. And also, please subscribe on YouTube to Pragmatism, the channel's Pragmatism USA, and follow us at pragmatismusa.com and on Facebook at pragmatismusa.com.